Welcome friends to another 40k video. Today we look at the life of the Silent King, from his role to bring down the Satan to why the Necrons are ordered to take a nap by him. So his name is Szarekh. He is the last of a line of rulers dubbed the Silent Kings. He is part of a triarch that led the ancient Necron Empire. During the time the Empire was in his care, the Necron met the Satan, who had come to fight the Necrons eventually. He was one of the triarch, a ruling council made of senior pharaohs, a Necron overlord in charge of a dynasty. The three in the triarch, the head of that position, the highest of the three, is called the Silent King. There is a reason for that. Like certain rulers of the Persian Empire in ancient days of terror, he only spoke to his subjects through others, two pharaohs for him. It's also similar to a case in ancient Rome, where the title equivalent to Silent King is given to Octavian Caesar. He dubbed the first amongst equals. Either way, the Silent King title passed from one group to the next. As due to the planet they were born on, the Necrons had variable lifespans, so when one Silent King fell, another was put in place. And so the title eventually came to belong to certain ruling families, certain royal dynasties, like say the position of the emperor in ancient China, where different families would take up the mantle of heaven, be they Ming or Yuan dynasties. Whilst Szarekh ruled his people, met the Satan. How this happens is mixed. Some say it's from a Necron stellar probe that found where the Satan were eating energy from suns. Other sources that the Necrons' hatred of the Old Ones called out to the Satan like a beacon. But when this did happen, the oldest Necron dynasties sought the Satan out for favour, for power, and these dynasties created living metal bodies to contain the Satan's essences, called by the Necrons a necrodermis. When this happened, the Satan would take on the look of Necron gods, playing into this role, this potential way to influence the Necrons, or the Necron tier as they're known at this time. And then one came before the Silent King. This one was called the Deceiver, though I'm sure he didn't actually use that name. It'd be a little obvious. But the king was ignorant of the Satan's real nature and granted the Satan an audience. The Deceiver, once granted this, spoke of a war between the Satan and the Old Ones, playing into the Necron feelings towards the Old Ones, a mutual enemy. The Satan said his side had lost and feared the vengeance of their foes, and so they had hidden, hoping to gather allies to call the Old Ones to account. And the king was told that, with their aid, the Necron would be granted what they craved, the immortality they had come to wanting due to the poor health of their species and the short, small lives that they had. And so they would be granted by the Deceiver this, without an obvious price, and perhaps that is a price by itself, but it would be offered to them as a boon, and this swayed Szarekh. There is much division within his empire, and as many know, a disparate land can be united through a shared hatred of an outer foe. Szarekh did not make a choice straight away. He talked to the others in the triarch and the nobles of his royal court. Oricon, who was a court astrologer, spoke out against the deal with the Satan, but he was the lone voice, and was eventually forced into a body himself, and so the alliance was struck. It would bring glory for the tier and the Old Ones, but it would also destroy the Necron souls. And this was something else also seen by Oricon, perhaps in some of his future divining. So as we said, what was the devil's bargain was made. The immortality was granted through biotransference, putting the Necron minds into metal bodies. The furnaces to do this roared day and night, consuming their sickly flesh, and giving all an enduring body of metal. As these changes were made, the Satan moved around the great machines and drank from the cast of life energy, increasing their own strength. Seeing them feast like the vampire names they had once held, Szarekh saw he had made a terrible mistake. His new body felt vital, the aches from his fragile organic existence were gone. His thoughts moved faster and clearer, but there was an emptiness there that could not be filled. He and the rest of his people had bargained away their very souls. Though I don't think he could deny the new bodies had elevated his people and taken away their frail forms. All levels of Necron society have been blessed with these gifts. Only a major injury to these new forms could hurt them, but with the biotransference also came embedded protocols, and the Silent King held these reigns to maintain control and thus unity of his people in this important time. And he did grow weary of this burden, but if he severed the protocols, his people would turn on him for the choices he'd made on their behalf. The outcome was the Satan and the Necrons can now fight as one. The Satan, and perhaps this was the plan all along, behind the bargain, but the Satan were glutted on the Necron life force, and with this, they could destroy planets, extinguish suns, and cause star systems to be eaten by black holes. The Old Ones moved through and sheltered in the webway, and newly made Necron legions attacked them there. They also attacked the allies to the Old Ones and harvested life force from them for their new masters. Perhaps this is the Eldari, I assume it is. And so the Old Ones were defeated, scattered, and ended. Szarekh, who strikes me as being a real chess player, waited for this moment to strike back. He wanted to make sure the now powerful Satan were vulnerable. He could not fight them even with his Necron forces, and he knew he had to defeat the Old Ones first, with the Satan's help, and then, and only then, would there be an accounting. So when this happened, the Silent King moved. The Satan did not realize the danger. They were perhaps too arrogant to see at this stage, and so the Necrons used the energies of the universe as weapons to fight the Satan, their supposed gods. But perhaps because of their birth in the early days of the universe, after all, the Satan was spawned from stars and thus made from the very fabric of reality, and so the Satan were pretty unkillable. But there was a perhaps worse fate that they could be subjected to. They could be imprisoned, they could be captured, they could be not allowed to experience any of the freedom they had known in the past roaming the universe. So they were divided and split down into shards, and then each shard was bound within a labyrinth, trapped inside, and allowed no autonomy but to do the bidding of the Necrons when they were allowed. Millions of Zarekh's people were lost in doing this, including those who had ruled with him, and so the Silent King was the only holder of power. But he felt the time of his people was now over, for the Eldari were in ascendance and had helped the Old Ones, and so they, that race, had become a target for the hatred of the Necrons. Due to their losses, the Necrons were in no position to challenge the Eldari, but Szarekh knew all things past. He had a deep, long-term perspective of time, and the Eldari's time would come, and the Necrons' time would begin again, as he ordered, and they would not disgrace the Necron cities by abandoning them. They would become tomb complexes. They would be hidden, filled with stasis crypts, and so the Necrons, under Zarekh's command, slept. The time frame, don't know how he came to this time frame to be fair, but the time frame given by Szarekh was 60 million Terran years, as the Imperium measures it. And after that, they'd wake up, take back what they had lost, and restore the empire they had once had, the one they had lost to the Satan's treachery. And perhaps eventually they would get back some sort of normal bodies, and thus the tomb world vaults were sealed, and then he destroyed the command protocols that had brought the Necrontier low, and then went into the blackness of space. The Silent King, finding the penance of solace only the Silent could know. 60 million years later, they began to wake, and their king returns. He sees the Tyranids in the void between galaxies, solve the threat they posed, the one that would stop the Necron Empire being reborn. He could not have them return to a galaxy lacking in life, where only Tyranid bioforms devour each other. The Necrons will be denied returning to real bodies, to transfer back into a normal life, to reclaim what they had lost to the Satan. So the king must marshal his people against the Tyranids. And when he comes back not by himself, but with a new triarch, Hapthatra the Radiant and Mesophet the Shadowed Hand, and a chained Satan. He returns and sees not what he'd hoped for. Some tomb worlds still slumbered or being destroyed, and he also sees new enemies arranged against him for the dominion of the galaxy from humanity, though he notes it is in descendants from what it once was. And he was right about one thing: the Eldari have reached their apex and are now a shadow of who they once were. And of course, the incursion of chaos was another new foe, though I believe the Star Gods did tie into the Empyrean a little bit, though it wouldn't have been filled with Chaos Gods like it was in the time of M40. So The Silent King might find some familiarity with those enemies, but he goes from tomb world to tomb world, trying to gather those he can, and hopes those who already fight, like the Imperium at Baal and Macragge, do not merely become food for the Nid's treasures, but they can become a shield which the Necrons can use to buy time and grow and reach their own apex yet again. And that, friends, is where I will end the tale of the Necron tier, the Necrons and the Silent King. What do you think to the video? Did you enjoy the Silent King lore? I knew some parts of it, but not others, so it was good to fill in some of those blanks. I really like the tie back to the old ones battling with the Satan and how the old ones were also tied to chaos. It seems to be a long-term thing, a long-term repetition in the galaxy, perhaps one that the Silent King himself can note. Anyway, let me know what you think to the lore here. Let me know if there's any other Necron things you'd like to cover. I've done quite a few Necron videos recently. So I'll leave things there with you. Drop me a comment below and let's have a chat.